Hello there! Welcome back to the Rough Cut Diamond Mines, the place I go to find the rough ideas that we can then turn into something a little more polished. As you know, I am your guide, Dreamscript. We've now reached day 6 of our Cursed Relics Art Challenge Speed Draw series, and I'm gonna put this out here. This was when the challenge really started to hit a bit of a wall, and those who are joining from Instagram will know that things started slowing down around this time there too. I don't really have an excuse for it, although there was plenty of stupid stuff going on IRL on my end at the time, but these kinds of things happen sometimes. We do our best to push through, but if you're not happy with the way a piece in an art challenge is going, please, and this is something I need to remind myself of constantly. Don't think that everything you make, even if you're planning to post it somewhere, that it has to be perfect of the first time around. There's been a reason that I started this by posting pictures of the first idea sketches on Instagram. It wasn't just so I could put together a better version later, but also so I could grow to be okay with putting less than my standard of complete work up for people to see. Because if I don't develop that flexibility, you guys will never see anything from me ever. It's okay not to have everything figured out right away. Don't feel pressured to do that before you start something, especially if it's something you're really passionate about. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's get to the actual point of this video. The prompt list says that day 6 is a vessel. Now, the word vessel is extremely vague, and I'll be real, that kind of annoyed me at first. At the most basic definitions, a vessel is a thing that holds something else. That's it. It could be a bowl, a bottle, a building. If you're looking at older definitions, it could also be a boat or something seaworthy, or not, depending how desperate you are. I couldn't even pick one of my stickers to help me out because that would feel like letting the sticker create the prompt rather than the prompt being influenced by the sticker. However, as I was trying to figure out what I was going to do for this, one definition stood out. This is more of a biblical connotation definition of the word vessel, so obviously it makes me a little itchy, but the word vessel can refer to a person, one that is especially embodies or regarded as holding a particular quality. Usually virtuous when used like this, but you get the general idea. And while I've done a bunch of cursed items in this challenge, I haven't really done any cursed individuals yet. And I don't mean like cursed individuals as in suffering from the curse of an item. No, that's different than what I'm talking about here. But part of that is kind of because that's something of a tricky balance to find. If you're playing any kind of RPG game with fantasy elements, it's easy to just slap the cursed label on something and have it be a mechanic that the player struggles with throughout the game. But to actually have a person be cursed in a way that isn't just somebody dealing with a long series of unfortunate circumstances out of their control or depression, although any real curse might end up with them being depressed, is harder to nail than you might think. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We still need our curse intensity, so let's spin that wheel. And it's debilitating minor. Okay, that's going to be an interesting one. Now, if you watched the Arrow episode of this series, you'll know that I went on this whole tangent rant thing about the major version of this and long-term diseases and conditions that cause a lot of problems for the people who suffer them. The minor version of this isn't necessarily simply a lesser version of the major. That would be way too easy. Debilitating doesn't always have to be regarding the physical health of a person. There are lots of things that can cause somebody to suffer disadvantages in life. Birth conditions, financial situations, educational level, general personality, social status, even just being in the wrong place at the wrong time are also things that can cause these kinds of issues in a person's life. Naturally, that is an issue in and of itself, and we haven't even touched on the added fantasy nonsense of things like predetermined destinies, entities controlling your fate, or other prophecy bullshit. You just need to look at Greek mythology or their plays to see how messy that whole thing can get. Ooh, Greek tragedies. Actually, that's not a bad idea. And we still haven't even picked out our sticker yet. I think I have the perfect one. This one, in fact. This is going to be fun. So, we have our elements. Now let's get this soup boiling and see what we get. Let's make a cursed artifact. Or, rather, person, in this case. So,
First things first, I think it's going to be pretty obvious that for this drawing, I'm going to be focusing more on making a character than I am making one item. As such, this one is more about the vibes of the whole picture rather than the vibes of just a single object. Since I'm making a cursed person, I felt it was more important to get the body language right for this, especially since I want to make them look absolutely exhausted by the weight of their curse and all it has put them through. Anyone who might have seen the original sketch that I posted on Instagram a while back will see that I kind of just dropped that whole idea because when I did that sketch, I was still working possibly with the idea of making a cursed set of armor rather than a cursed individual. I decided to switch gears when I started getting into the ideas of Greek tragedies, and so when I was looking back at the sticker, it's clear I decided to make a Greek and Roman soldier. So I seriously doubt that the weapon I gave them is actually what either of those cultures used in the time period, but it looks cool, and that's what this picture's about right now. I did make the decision not to include the raven, crow. It's probably one of those two, something in the corvid family. That's mostly because with what I decided to do for the curse and in the story, I think it would have felt a little bit too much like the Raven Queen deity in D&D. I do love her and how Critical Role played with that idea in the first season, but that wasn't what I was going for here. Oh, yeah, and I know, I did forget to record a decent chunk of this picture's progress again. Yeah, no, I'm sorry this happened again. I think it's partly because I am still getting used to recording my process, and when it's a picture that I'm actually excited to work on, it can be easy to forget to hit the record button before each session I'm working on it. Sometimes you just get lost in the work itself and suddenly glance down and realize you were working for over an hour and recorded none of it. But at least you get to see the finished product, so that's something, right? I'll be honest, I spent so much time trying to apply textures to everything, so that I think it more than makes up for the time lost. And the color matching was painful, to say the least. I mean, I wanted him to look like he came from that era, from that kind of genetic gene pool, but I don't know if I did that very well. So, after all the coloring was done, I was just so happy to be done with it, even as fun as it started. Speaking of, why don't we finish up this part of my rambling and I tell you the story of this burdened soldier? Enjoy! There are reasons why people are warned not to anger the gods. If you are lucky, they will simply strike you down in one blow. Sometimes they may ruin your fields, set monsters upon you, deny you love or the possibility of children. But even in these cases, you're still getting off easy. As the gods can be as cruel as our world when, even despite all the best efforts, it is uncontrollable, untamed, unpredictable. And the worst punishments the gods can give can at first seem like a gift to be envied. Such is the one that fell to the young soldier who, in a night of extreme drinking with his fellows, deemed it a humorous enough joke to relieve himself at the foot of a statue dedicated to the goddess of death. Oh, certainly his companions cackled at his foolish actions, but the dream that came that night was truly an unsettling one. That same goddess, whose statue he had vandalized, towered over him, her face contorted with anger and disgust at the mere sight of him. The sight alone would have brought many a man to his knees in fear and alarm, but this young man had been taught not to let fear do such a thing to him. Such reactions could spell his end in the battlefield, after all. But then she spoke, in a voice that was as cold and as sharp as any blade. Her words burned into his mind as she glared down at him. Never dare to stand before me again, fool. That was her command, and he could almost hear something being severed within him. The goddess turned away and left him alone with his confusion, only to be awoken by his fellows in a cold sweat. He didn't feel any different. There was nothing outwardly different about him. Perhaps it had just been a silly dream brought on by all the drink? Perhaps it had been merely a warning to stay away from the goddess's temples? Either way, he shook off the sense of dread and carried on with his life. In his day and age, combat was common, so soldiers always had something to keep them busy, and thus always had a job. And it was a good one. It was an honor, after all, to fight for one's home, to defend its people and interests from outside invaders. The man himself was a good soldier, young and fit, decently skilled with a blade, and followed all orders given without question. And without question, he and his fellows marched into enemy lands to take the fortress of a known betrayer to the country. The battle was hard, and the traitor had set up multiple traps that claimed the lives of many of his fellows. But he forced his way through everything and made his way to the end of this trap-guarded keep to slay the traitor. And although he did bring back the traitor's head to his superiors, he didn't understand then why he had momentarily seen the face of the goddess of death sneer and turn away from him when he entered the final room. There had been some bright flash. The goddess, and then he was staring down at the traitor who looked horrified at him. He would learn the truth later. After that victory in the traitor's fortress, he rose in the ranks to become a general of his own, leading the charge when new battles arose, until the day when he was struck by an arrow that by all accounts should have been deadly. And while he felt the pain of it striking his chest, he felt himself being thrown to the ground by the force of the hit. He didn't die. He once again saw the goddess turn away from him, and he blinked and found himself still on the battlefield, the arrow still sticking out of his chest. Still alive. He didn't understand, but he did what he was there to do and laid his enemies low. Upon returning home, he was awarded the title of Undying. That status rose him to new heights, allowing him more of the finer things in life. Things were good. Until suddenly they weren't. Although the wounds he had accumulated over the years never outright killed him, they did not leave him unscarred. Where that arrow had struck his chest, he always felt as if it was still there, making his heart beat painfully. That first flash he had survived had turned out to be some superheated burst of fire, burning his skin and making him more sensitive to direct sunlight. And later, the multiple poisoning attempts at the hands of his trophy war bride left him with a sensitive stomach. But he was still a soldier. He had to go out and lead battles in the unforgiving sun, push his body to its limits, eat whatever was found on the fields. And again, there would be incidences that caused him to see the goddess again. And each time, she turned away from him. Eventually, after another battle had given him a should-have-been fatal injury, he couldn't take it any longer. He had already watched many of his companions fall in battle, and while his position as general made his life at home more comfortable, it also isolated him from the other soldiers, who now could not treat him or see him as more than their commanding officer. The friends that had once laughed with him on drunken nights were long gone, and he couldn't take it anymore. He abandoned the army, left his lofty position to return home. He went to the temple of that goddess of death, choosing to become a servant there, cleaning and maintaining the temple and spending every night praying for her mercy and forgiveness. Surely his transgressions were no worse than those he had seen in battle, those that had used the goddess's name without faith nor honor, and they had been allowed to die. Surely he was not so different from those people that he could not be allowed the same after learning the error of his actions. For years and years this went on, but he was only ever met with cold, pointed silence. After all, the gods hold grudges eternal, and for seemingly the most petty of reasons. Thank you everyone for watching this far into the video. Of course, I have more of these speed drawing videos planned, so I will see you all in the next one. Until then, sweet dreams, and here's to all the little things that bring out the magic in you.